practice take one of my outline. So I'm going to read because a little bit because I'm not quite ready to just kind of go off the cuff. But take one. So Donald Trump. Is he a Russian asset? Yes. But what does that mean? What does it mean to be an asset? Is it a crime? Is he a spy? What do the Russians have on him, if anything? Sounds far-fetched. People just dismiss it. It's crazy. Well, what does it mean to be an asset? It can mean a lot of things. It could mean a paid spy like Robert Hanssen or Aldrich Ames, and I think that's why people sort of dismiss out of hand that whole notion of him being an asset. These are guys that sold state secrets to the Russians for money, but that's not Trump, especially in the early years when he was recruited, as you'll see as I move along through this process. Trump wouldn't have been in any kind of possession of any information, at least in his early years. Later on, after he became president, he was, and that's debatable, whether or not certain information may have been shared with the Russians after he left office. But early years, certainly not. And that's not why he would have been recruited by the Russians. It could mean he was an informant, but that really doesn't also have anything to do with Trump. That wouldn't be it. So the other classification is a political asset, which is basically any influential individual that can be leveraged to advance Russian interests. Well, at the time that the Russians were recruiting Donald Trump, he was seen as an influential person, at least on a limited basis. And at the time, the Russians were really having a lot of difficulty recruiting Americans. It was very difficult. A lot of Russians were afraid to potentially recruit Americans because they were worried that they would be members of the FBI. And then if they recruited this person and it was an FBI agent, then their careers were finished. So recruiting anyone in the United States was very difficult, but it happened. So then the other thing to think about is it a crime for someone to be a Russian asset or for the Russians to recruit an asset? And the answer is it could be, but most of the time, no. Intelligence agencies work in a manner where they can work within the law to achieve their goals. Was it illegal for the Soviets to invite Trump to Russia in 1987? Did Trump commit a crime by accepting the invitation? Of course not. Additionally, the KGB studied the American legal system for years and knew how to work within the law. They knew to hire high-powered K Street lobbyists and lawyers to represent their interests if they ever did get caught stepping over the line. Here are a few examples of people that the Russians hired. William Sessions, not Jeff Sessions, the one that worked for Trump, William Sessions, former FBI director, 87 to 93, became the attorney for the notorious Russian gangster Simeon Mogilevich, otherwise known as the boss of bosses or the brainy Don, because he was the guy that first figured out how to launder billions of dollars in assets that were stolen from the Russian state through banks in the West. And then there was Louis Freeh, another former FBI director, 1993 to 2001. He was hired to represent Russian state bank Alfa Bank, and he represents Russian oligarch Miguel Friedman to defend against money laundering investigations brought by the Department of Justice. So the fact is the Russians very easily could have recruited Trump to be an asset without committing any crimes at all. Although it is likely that many of Trump's property deals with Russians that occurred later were money laundering operations, and many of those money laundering property deals involved the aforementioned Simeon Mogilevich, but we'll get into all that later.